following episode recounts the details of a real homicide investigation. All information presented is taken from public court records, law enforcement files, and direct investigative experience. Some of the names of some of the victims may have been changed, and individuals involved are used with the utmost respect, and no part of this story is intended to exploit or sensationalize their suffering. As a retired homicide investigator, I believe these stories matter, to honor the victims, to understand the truth, and to bring closure to the families left behind. Some contents may be disturbing to listeners. Discretion is strongly advised. Greetings. I'm Detective Harry Gavel, Sergeant First Class retired from the Camden County Prosecutor's Office. I don't know if any of you would remember what Camden City, New Jersey was like back in the 1990s, but I can tell you, I worked in the belly of the beast. It was 1991. I call this case the graveyard shift. Indeed. At 3:20 a.m., the phone rang at Camden City's Police Department's Central Dispatch. A senseless, brutal murder was being reported by the murder victim himself, a one Gary Gottshaw. This wasn't just some regular murder, if there ever was such a thing as a quote-unquote regular murder. Mr. Gottshaw happened to be an ordained minister. He was moonlighting on the graveyard shift, struggling to make a buck to support his family at the Merritt gas station. He was working alone on the Boulevard of Fear this night, a desolate area in the middle of a cold winter's night, on the side of a 4-lane highway which led to inner city Camden and branched into Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It consisted of wide open spaces, windswept lots with abandoned graveyards scattered with leaning and missing headstone markers, gas stations, run-down project housing, and very scattered old vacant factory buildings, once bustling with industrial product and business needs. Now, just a shell of abandoned broken glass window buildings used for prostitution, acts of vandalism, shooting galleries for the addicts that pimped out the hookers of the boulevard, homeless squatters, winos, freight car bums, and stray skinny dogs roaming the area, searching for food, and the like. It was not uncommon to see their campfires burning in the night off in the distance of the highway, the fire scantily reflecting the heavily graffitied walls of the now eyesore buildings which were once standing tall and proud, now a scary place indeed. Enter vicious Victor Pitt, the pimp, the green-eyed devil, the pimp and crackhead black male in his 20s whose occupation was just that, pimping a young hooker, a white female we call Cynthia Arrogance, who was very much under his influence and control. The pair pulled into the Merritt gas station in front of a set of gas pumps to pretend that they were legitimate customers looking for a full tank of fuel. After they got their tank filled with gas, Pitt produces a sawed-off shotgun, orders the attendant to give him any cash that he had on him and to open the safe. Mr. Gottshaw does not have the combination or the key for the safe, which is company policy. That policy is posted in plain view for all patrons to see. He tells that to Pitt, who doesn't believe him. Pitt then fires a single, loud shotgun blast at close range into the stomach of the gas attendant, which basically cut him in half. As Pitt and his accomplice speed off into the night with nothing other than maybe a tank of gas. The very severely injured and quickly dying and bleeding out attendant manages to call the Camden Police Dispatch. The poor man is literally holding his intestines in his hands as he pleads for assistance. He's bleeding profusely, dying as he is being questioned by the police dispatcher. Questions like, what's your name? What's your date of birth? What's the address? What's the phone number you're calling from? Where is the person that shot you? Were there any other people with him? Are there any witnesses in the area? Etc., etc. Well, of course, these questions are agonizing for him. He has no idea that she had already summoned for police and ambulance, which are responding to his location. What he does not know, that they are responding. There are response teams en route to him, while the dispatcher is trying to keep him talking and getting information, which they are trained to do. When the police and ambulance EMTs, it's emergency medical technicians, arrive on the scene, Mr. Gottshaw is seen lying on the ground at the foot of a shanty that housed the telephone at the gas pumps. He's in a pool of his own blood, just starting to freeze in the blistering cold katabatic winds that swept over the open lots and landscape of the area. He's now dead, his bloody hands clenched as if he were praying. A truly senseless end of a good man struggling to support his family. A minister of God shot down, murdered as he worked to support his large family. This case was heartbreaking. The more we learned about the background of the individual and we understood the facts of the crime, we couldn't help but dedicate ourselves completely and totally to investigate this case until it was completely solved. Arrives Detective Ray Massi, my partner from the Camden City Detective Bureau. The next 4 months would prove to be very challenging for both of us. We were baffled in the beginning of this case due to the lack of any physical evidence or witness information which might point us to a suspect. Pope John Paul is just not available at 3:20 a.m. in the city of Camden, New Jersey, to bear witness to a shotgun murder of a minister, a man of the cloth. That chosen profession of being a minister just didn't provide enough money for him to make ends meet. I'm sure he didn't want to work the graveyard shift pumping gas in Camden, New Jersey. It was a matter of need. He needed to. That need cost him his life. My partner and I pounded the streets every day and every night, searching for clues, searching for a witness, anything to shed some light on the case. We listened to the 911 call to try and gain any suspect information from that. No luck. We set up roadblocks on the Admiral Wilson Boulevard, stopping traffic flow both ways, into and away from the Philadelphia and Camden areas, the downtown areas. We passed out flyers during the same time frame of the murder, 1 hour before through 1 hour after. Nothing. No one saw or heard shit. We were frustrated, but not deterred. We took pride in what we did, Plus, we liked each other and were friends. The case gave the reason for us to team up, to work and ride together. It wasn't always like that. Some 15 years prior, while I was a run-amok patrolman, Detective Mass was a Camden City patrolman, and he lived in an apartment complex in my town. He used to hang out with a local radio announcer, and they used to party, and it got a little loud sometimes. I would catch the call, usually while I was working the midnight shift, and I'd be dispatched to a noise complaint at the Hartford Arms Apartments. Of course, the party goers would not answer the door, which was fine. I preferred that they didn't answer the door, to tell you the truth, because I knew there was a couple of cops up there partying. Wasn't bothering really anyone. Maybe the music got a little bit loud, but if they answered the door, I'd have to ask them to turn it down, but they never answered the door. And I have been called there a few times. So, Detective Mass used to come in at a chicken store called the Chicken Shack that I was part owner in back in that day. The Chicken Shack was located on Manifrom Avenue in Camden, right across the street from the West Jersey Hospital. If I'd be working there and Ray would come in uniform on duty, I could tell that he didn't like me. I didn't have any beef with Ray. I liked him, actually, and was glad that he finally saw that I was the real deal, and so was he. His demeanor was such that it appeared that he would like to have a fair one with me, a fist fight. It just never came to that. It could have. Ray was tough as nails. I had balls, and I was very fast with my hands. He was a little bit taller than me, not by much, but a little bit. It would have been a good one. We both grew up in the streets of the city of Camden. We had that in common. When I was asked who I would think would win the fight between the two of us, I replied, no one would win. I'm sure Ray thought that he could kick my ass, and I thought the same. I could kick his. No one would win. We would lose. Both of us would lose. A good friendship. At some point, we both reached a silent peace. We ended up going shopping together on Broadway in Camden City and bought Dick Tracy-type fedora hats and started a small trend in homicide dubbed the Hat Squad. After an exhaustive search, we located a night watchman that had been working a security job in an abandoned factory warehouse across the boulevard from the gas station. It was located a few hundred yards back and away, sitting off the highway. This guard's job that was working there was to keep the night crawlers away from the warehouse which he was guarding. Our focus was to try and find prostitutes, ladies of the night that would be out at 3:20 a.m., walking the boulevard, peddling their wares. But we couldn't find any. Like I said, this was a desolate place to begin with. When your locals know that the police are out there scouring, searching, and looking for witnesses, they have a tendency to make themselves scarce. We were lucky to locate this witness, this security guard. The only reason he called us was this particular homicide was all over the newspapers. In the newspaper articles, we were searching for witnesses. We had none. So he decided to call in. He called in. We went to interview him while he was on duty one evening. He told us that he was working on the morning of the armed robbery murder. He was at a small desk, seated in the dark front area of the building he was guarding. It was the dead of night. Hardly a sound could be heard, except for an occasional car or two on the boulevard passing by, or a rat scurrying about in the darkness. He said at precisely 3:20 a.m., he heard a large, distant, loud bang, which echoed off of a building. He thought at first that it might have been a car backfiring, but then there was no mistaking it. He happened to be an ex-cop, and he believed more that what that was in fact a gunshot. He stated he looked at his watch. It was 3:20 a.m. He picked up his chair and moved deeper into the confines of the building just in case. He didn't bother to look outside. This was Camden, New Jersey, folks. If you look for trouble, you're bound to find it. When he looked out, he might have seen something he didn't want to see. Who knows? But he didn't look out because he didn't see anything. He just heard the shot. He decided best thing to do was to notify the police that he did hear the shot. After all, that's what police officers, retired or not, do. They get involved. Now, because there had been a string of armed robberies along the boulevard here, the governor put a citywide task force together, which was formed using local police, county police, and state police from New Jersey. The governor would do ride-alongs with the state police at that time, on occasion taking photo ops in the city of her actually frisking drug suspects. That caused her to be the recipient of some negative ink from the press, but she survived it. So we were actually getting nowhere fast with this investigation. So now, we also had previously decided to start scooping up prostitutes and their pimps. They are the street ghouls of the night. They roam the streets. They take refuge under any local overpasses in the area. They flag down cars to solicit sex. They often direct their quote-unquote John to a secluded lot or building for the purpose of having various forms of sex for money, or robbing them, or both. They would be questioned about their knowledge of the murder. What did they hear on the street? Did they know who did it? They would be given business cards with how to contact us. They were told they would be paid for their information if it turned out to be reliable. You know the drill. Well, finally, it pays off. 4 months now into the case, we get an anonymous tip from an unknown female that a prostitute known as quote-unquote Snow Bitch in her 20s was complaining to another prostitute that her pimp had beat the shit out of her, and while doing so, he broke her left arm. She went on to say that she was scared of him because he was getting high 24/7, and he killed a man. He killed a man at a gas station because he didn't give him the money. Well, that fit our crime. That was our case to a T. This individual worried that he would kill her next. She wanted a friend to know that if anything happened to her, that it was him. That was it. A white girl in her 20s called Snow Bitch, with a broken left arm and wearing a white cast. Detective Mass and I went into the nickname file where he found a Camden prostitute known as Cynthia Arrogance, a white female in her 20s, and her street name was Snow Bitch. Last known address, Erie Street, North Camden, a rough section of the city. The hunt for her is on. We're still picking up whores in the area, asking who knows her, where she lives, where she hangs, who's her pimp, where she shits, basically. Whatever. But our investigation was heating up. We had something. We were now looking for someone who could very possibly have been an eyewitness to this case. We checked the local hospitals and found that a person by that name was casted for a broken left arm. Bingo, we thought. Her address given was in a decent area of East Camden. Upon checking there, it was a dead end. She gave false address to the hospital. Okay, we expected that. Happens all the time. Now one day, Detective Massi is heading into work on the day shift. By now, he was purposely traveling on the Admiral Wilson Boulevard to get to work. He spots a young girl walking under the bridge, and she has a cast on her left arm. He picks her up, brings her into the Camden City Detective Bureau. I was already on my way to the Bureau to meet up for the day to go about our investigation. When I get there, I see Mass standing up by his desk. He has a huge shit-eating grin on his silly face, and the Snow Bitch is seated at his desk. Get the F out of Dodge. We're in business. So, we take her into an interview room, and we begin our interview process with Cynthia Arrogance. She's clammed up tighter than a whale's ass, and that's waterproof. She would not go for ice water on a hot tin roof. Well, we knew why. She was petrified of her pimp. This wasn't the first time he beat the shit out of her. Hell, this time he broke her friggin' arm. We tried everything on her. She was just convinced that he would kill her if she ever ratted on him. After all, she saw firsthand how quick he shot and killed a man. We couldn't even get her to tell us where she was sleeping, where she was laying her head at night. Well, that gave us an idea. We hoped that she could possibly lead us to her pimp, and we believed her pimp might be the Green-Eyed Devil. Now, we gave her credit for being street smart. However, we were smarter. That's what keeps us sharp. So we hatched a plan. We dropped her off where Detective Mass had picked her up earlier that day, and we put a loose one on her. We had given her a few bucks to buy something to eat since we had her at the Detective Bureau for so long. She was trained like a circus chimp. Even though she feared her attacker, she feared more that if she didn't go back to him, she would regret it. She was scared to death to tell him that she was with the police, of course, all that day. So she made sure she was not going to be followed. She walked to a city rundown row home where she had been staying with her pimp, and she gives him the cash that we had given her. She tells him a bullshit story that she had a mark who shortchanged her and kept her for hours. She told her pimp that, as always, she asked for $20 in advance for sex. Just like Pitt had always told her, the mark gives you the money first. The mark gave it to her, but he couldn't get it going, so he kept her. She finally told the Mark that if he dropped her off, he could pick her up tomorrow and he could do his thing, no charge. The good news was, we didn't know it yet, but she had led us to the green-eyed devil. It was now game on. We kept the surveillance on the house. We got some good photographs of her pimp, and he was identified by one of the guys who was in homicide at the time. He gives us his name, Victor Pitt. We were learning that this guy was one wicked, evil, criminal bastard. We were laser focused to case him up for the cold-blooded murder of the minister. We continued to snatch arrogance up whenever we could, while being reasonably certain that her pimp, Mr. Pitt, was not following her close behind as to keep track of her earnings as she was hooking on the city streets. It was a task that took careful preparation, watching the house while we watched her movements. It was a bitch, but it had to be done. We needed to break her. We had nothing linking Pitt to the robbery murder, except we believed our blind tip that arrogance was the eyewitness to that horrific murder. We were not only impatient men who were taught patience by the very nature of our job, we were also very determined men, well-seasoned homicide detectives, both city guys. We knew that when the apple was ripe, it would fall. Not a minute before, no wine before its time, so the saying goes. After several more hit and miss further attempts to get arrogance to talk about what she knew, both through talking to her on the street and at the detective bureau, we had planted a seed in her that when they did arrest her boyfriend with the robbery murder that we knew he did with her on the early morning in question, she would be spared no mercy. She was actually stunned when she learned that we knew Pitt's name. This made her panic. We also knew that she had a child which was being raised by her mother due to her crack cocaine addiction, whom she false-heartedly believed she would be able to get back custody of one day if she could ever get clean. We explained that we knew she didn't pull the trigger. However, if she continued to protect Pitt, she would be charged just the same. If it was determined that she was cooperating as a witness, well, being there with the killer, with or without knowledge as to what occurred, and her aiding and abetting a criminal, could have a bearing on her culpability. At this point, knowing that we were barking up the right tree, and this knowledge making her scared shitless, she broke. Finally. Therein was her mouse hole. Her version was that she did not know that he was going to kill anyone, of course. She states that all she knew or believed that he was going to rob the guy and with the money buy some crack cocaine with whatever cash they got. She claimed that the very reason he beat her up and broke her arm was because she was freaking out because she had killed a man. She was no dummy. Like I said, she was very street-wise crack whore. They can be very formidable. They can be an obstacle in any investigation, depending on a lot of her dependency of the drug. how long since her last hit, and how much money she could make. Sometimes only the fear of the unknown can overcome the power of their addiction. She agreed to give a detailed interview and a tape recorder statement after a promise of police protection from Pitts. She greatly feared he would kill her. For sure he would kill her after this. She was scared to death. Pitts was brought to the prosecutor's office eventually. He was read his constitutional rights. He immediately denied everything and everything. He never did confess. We even had his cousin, the homicide detective that worked with us, even had him take a run at him. Nothing. We even brought Cynthia Arrogance into the room to confront him. She told him that she told us what happened, hoping that would cause him to break. As soon as she saw him glaring at her with his piercing green eyes, she recanted her entire story immediately. Well, luckily we did have it on tape, like I said. But she said, in front of Mr. Pitt, that she had lied. They didn't go to the Merrick gas station that night, and they didn't do it. They didn't do anything. No problem. They had an eyewitness statement, a sworn statement matching details of the crimes that only the perpetrators would know. They were both booked on attempted robbery and murder and the first degree based on her original sworn statement. Our next move was to let her sit in jail with a very high bail and continue to try and get her back on task as time went on. Well, eventually we were successful. Once she dried out and came to her senses, she did an addendum to her statement admitting that she recanted due to her sheer fear of the man who got her addicted and pimped her out in the streets of the Boulevard of Fear, and that he was the man responsible for breaking her arm. Her new focus was getting clean, getting this behind her, getting her child back, letting the court release custody of her child to her. She wanted to be reinstated as a mother. She never took the witness stand. They both pled guilty to the crimes. She received a much lesser sentence based on a couple of things. One, we were utilizing her as an eyewitness to the murder against the actual murderer, Victor Pitts. Now, she was involved in the plan to commit the robbery, and the belief that she was not the actual shooter, the fact that she would cooperate for the prosecution as witness, and that fact that she didn't pull the trigger is what got her a lesser sentence. Now, of course, the prosecutor planned to use her as their chief witness against Pitt if the case ever did go to trial. Our insurance policy that she would testify to that fact was that she was motivated to show she would do the right thing if she wanted to get custody back of her child. Before the arrests were made, I was called into the office and put on the hot seat by my then Lieutenant Bob Whalen and Captain Belzano. The lieutenant told me in no uncertain terms that I had better fess up that I had called the wife of the decedent, Gary Gottshaw's wife, and complained to her that my partner and I had been working on the case and that we had what we felt was enough inculpatory evidence to make an arrest of her husband's killer, but that the prosecutor would not give us a warrant to make the arrest by telling the detectives, us, that we didn't have enough evidence yet. Well, I told him that I had never spoken to Mrs. Gottshaw ever since we initially informed her that her husband had been killed. Well, the captain comes into the office where I was seated, and they both start questioning me again. They told me that it would be better if I told them before they called the prosecutor to come and sit in on this interview. The lieutenant said, in no uncertain terms again, if you did it and you lie about it, you will surely get fired today. Well, that's scary shit if you love and need your job. Again, I assured them that I had not called the woman and did not have any knowledge as to who did. They stopped the questioning, and the subject was never discussed again. It is unknown to this day as to who actually made that phone call to Mr. Gottshaw's wife, but it wasn't me. I would never betray my oath of office, period. The office did not care how good you were. If you screwed up, you were gone. You are, in fact, dispensable. Not long after this cold-blooded, brutal murder of a man of the cloth, the Merritt gas station was demolished completely, and another service station rose in its place. Good, because all it was after that murder was a tragic memorial to where a good man, a father, a minister, lost his life for no good reason. The end. I'm Detective Sergeant First Class Harry Gavel. Stay tuned for more episodes from the Murder Capital.